I can hear you. Thank you. Saira, and welcome back, everyone. Up next, I hope everyone got to have their chai. If you're here, it probably means you didn't, so thank you for being here. Fun time. Up next, we have a reflection by Miss Tina Schweickert, joining us here today from Salem, Oregon, my neighbor. She serves in the SSIO's Environmental Sustainability Committee. She has served in multiple roles in this organization, including YA Advisor and Region 6 Vice President. Her book, Tread Softly, Sathya Baba's Teachings on Nature and the Environment, was published in 2005. And she is here today to talk to us about selfless service as a way of life and share experiences with Swami and her environmental work. Please help me in welcoming Tina. Thank you.
Sairam. Dear Swami, resident of my heart, my humble pranams at your lotus feet. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's been wonderful to meet again with people I've known for a long time, but don't get to see too often these days, and to meet new members of our Sai family. Always wonderful, warms my heart. So I'm going to be talking to you about selfless service as a way of life and some stories around that and how that has happened in my own life from before I met Baba to after when I was with the Forum and how it expanded during his time. And it continues after he left his Forum. But I want to start with just talking a little bit about how extraordinary this being, Sri Sathya Sai Baba, who graced the earth for 85 years with those beautiful lotus feet, and brought to us another way of reaching enlightenment. And we've been talking about that all day today, the idea of selfless service with love. He didn't ask us to do some kind of meditation, go off in seclusion. He didn't ask us to go up into caves in the Himalayas. He didn't want us to become monks and nuns, not the majority of us. He wanted us to be in the world, and take the divine love and selfless service wherever we are, in our families, with our friends, in our community, in our workplace, and beyond. And I think that's extraordinary. And it doesn't mean that he didn't support and guide people that did go off into the Himalayas and are still there in caves or wherever, praying, sacrificing for the welfare of the world, as he did. I'll tell you one little story. I don't know if any of you have read the book Cave in the Snow. It was written by a woman named Vicki McKenzie. At the time, she was from Britain. Later became Tenzin Palmo. She was a Tibetan Buddhist nun. And she spent almost 11 years off and on in a cave, way up in, what's going on? Still green, okay. Way up in the Himalayas, even in the winters, by herself, very difficult circumstances. And once I went to see her speak in Portland, Oregon, and afterwards I walked up to her and I said, "You were in India for a long time. Did you ever meet Sri Sathya Sai Baba?" She smiled a little bit and said, "Well, no, not in the physical, but he came to me often in the cave." So that told me, he is reaching out to people that we don't even know where they are, what they're doing. His mission is so big. But those of us here and in the organization, we're carrying his name, his form, his teachings forward. And we're doing it, obviously, listening to everyone today, in a very big way. And hearing Dr. Hari talk about going to different medical camps around the world, we were discussing Benin in Africa, and how there's 1,000 Africans, not Indians that immigrated there, but Africans that are chanting Vedas and singing and praising Baba. And I hear about these things, and I just know this is part of the work, slowly but surely being done to transform this world, and we're all part of it. So I'm going to start with when I was a young adult. I grew up in Southern California, but I was feeling like starved for nature. And so I knew I needed to move north. And when I was 21, I was able with my first husband to move to Oregon. Not long after that, I just suddenly had this experience of divine love. I was looking out the window. We lived in a rural area, a little small farm, looking out at an old growth Douglas fir tree, and suddenly this just bliss and divine love just like descended. And it was hard because it was like, whoa, but it was wonderful because at the time I had been questioning whether God even exists. And so this came at a time was like, oh, God does exist, and this is what God is. And there was this knowledge, this knowing that came along with it, totally transformed my life. And part of the way that it felt like I could live in the world with this was to serve. It seemed like the natural outcome of having this experience. I needed to serve, I just knew it. And so one of the things, that came to me where I could serve easily was a rural neighbor who was alone. He was in his mid-80s, no family, was a farmer, and I would help him with day-to-day activities, but mostly it was the idea of the loneliness, to be a companion to him, for our whole family to be a companion. And he was able then to stay in his home until the end of his life. He never had to go into a home. And it was so wonderful being able to do that work, both for him and for me and my whole family. It was incredible. During the same time, I was still involved in the idea of environment. The crisis was still looming, and I was kind of getting away from that with my family and the farm and everything. But I heard a Native American woman speak on the radio, and she's talking about the environmental crisis, and she said, if you really care, if you really want to do something about this, go to a place where you feel close to nature, where you feel connected, and tell Mother Earth, I want to be of service to you. Just say those words out loud. I want to be of service to you. So I did that. Within a few months, I was going back to the university. I hadn't finished my undergrad work. Back to the university studying environmental science. Graduated in 2 years, spent a year volunteering to do the 20th anniversary of Earth Day at the Oregon State Capitol. Hard work, really stretched me. I wasn't ready for that kind of leadership at that age, but I did it anyway. And then a career where I found out later, really it was Bob working through me. That there were so many things that happened that he wanted to happen, and he was just putting me at the right place at the right time so it could make it happen. So Baba came into my life in 1995, and it was an extraordinary way, visions, dreams, all these things. And I started attending the Portland Center, met some local devotees, and I knew I needed to go to India. I needed to see him in the form. But it was like, oh gosh, 2 weeks off work, traveling halfway around the world, leaving my family, my young children. I just didn't know that I could really do that. So I'm like, Baba, you've got to give me a sign. I need a sign. So I was at work, and I went and took a break. I walked downtown. I'm like, Baba, I need a sign. I know you can give me a sign. And all of a sudden, I felt this thing, look up. So I looked up. I was walking by a bank. I looked up, and on the bank sign up above, there was little writing that said, sign 5314. I'm like, okay, that's a sign. Well, I got back to work and I had a voicemail, and it was from my friend Ilsa, the devotee that I was going to travel with. She said, Tina, I've got the tickets. We're leaving May 31st. Well, that was 5/31, right? I thought, well, what about the 4? And at the end, our messages in those days, they said what time that message was left. So at the end it said, this message was left at 4 p.m. And I knew it was all there. So no doubt, I was going to India. So the first trip there, we were at Whitefield in the ashram at Vrindavan, and we wonderfully were able to room with a couple of ladies that lived and followed Baba. One from Ireland, one from South Africa. So they helped us to learn about how to be close to him, what we could do to get close to Baba. So I've been writing letters. I wrote letters that kind of dealt with my spiritual path and ones about family members and stuff. And he wasn't coming close to me, and I couldn't give him any of the letters. Then I ended up writing one, which one of the woman from Ireland, Sarah, suggested that I write, had to do with what was going on in my heart. I was having a lot of issues, and I thought, he doesn't want to know about that. But I ended up pouring that out in a letter, and that next day we got line 1 right there on one of the main aisles, and when he saw me holding the letter, he came straight over to take it, just right out of my hand. And he said, "So happy you have come, ma'am." And in my left hand, I was holding a japamala I had bought, and he blessed the japamala. And at that point, with the whole thing, I was gone. I was like in another world, just in an energy form, and my eyes closed, and I didn't open them until he was walking out of the hall. I could see his orange robe going off. Well, afterwards, a woman that was sitting across from me came over, and she said, "You had an extraordinary experience." And I'm like, "Yeah." I didn't know what she wanted to say, but the woman next to me said, "She's psychic. You need to go ask her what she saw." So I did, and she said, "Well, when Swami was blessing the japamala," she said, "there were 3 elves dancing there." And I thought, "Oh, what does that mean?" She said, "Well, it means you are of nature, that you're inspired by nature." So all of this came together in less than 30 seconds of interaction with Swami. He welcomed me. He told me, in a sense, that he cared about what was going on in my heart and that this was integral to my spiritual path, and understood that what my passion is, what my role might be. All of that in just this very, very brief time. So the bond was set. So after this, just doing the center activities, reading discourses, I really wanted to know what his environmental message was. Because it was, in different places, different discourses. So that's when I started doing the research and wrote the book, because I wanted to know, what is this holistic message of his? So that's why I wrote the book. And it was so wonderful then, because after that, I could work within the organization on that topic, helping to spread his message about the need to protect nature and take care of Mother Earth, show gratitude, respect. And that has grown. So many people have taken it up, especially young adults, really taking up that well. And so now the Sci 100 Tree Initiative, with the millions of trees around the world being planted, it's just really amazing and wonderful work to do. And I encourage all of you who have that in mind, that's part of your passion, to get involved. It's extraordinary. And this is part of what I see with Baba, is that he came to us as common people doing common things in an extraordinary way. And in this way, being role models for how this world will transform. So after he left his body, it was in 2014, I woke up during the night and there he was. He was just like standing next to my bed. And I was like, "Oh, Baba," just very excited to see him. He didn't say anything. He just pointed to the southwest. And then he showed me railroad tracks. And then he showed me a Pueblo dwelling with a pole leaning up against the wall. And a dancing Native American figure. This very, I could see it well. The next morning I drew it to make sure I didn't lose it. Well, it turns out, after I did some thinking, researching, and talking to Ruben Talavera, who was a protege of George Walking Bear, who some of you know, that I was to go to the Hopi reservation. And that dancing figure I saw was a kachina, which is their representation of different spirits. And so I knew he was asking me, another form of service. The guru was asking me specifically to do something. I didn't know why, although Ruben thought maybe I was supposed to see someone, take something to someone there. So he ended up sending me some sacred Hopi tobacco, and with that, Baba's vibhuti and some other items, I created a sacred bundle to take with me to see who this person might be. The challenge of this was my husband at the time, Frank, had Alzheimer's. He absolutely did not want to go to Arizona. It's like he did not want to leave home, period. But I knew Baba asked me to do it, I have to do it. And I know he wouldn't have asked us to do this if we couldn't do it. So despite the obstacles of that continued for the whole trip, we went. And I had to arrange a guide ahead of time, because that's how you can go see the mesas, see their sacred sites. You have to have a guide. And so we're in the van with her, just Frank and I and the guide. And I told her why I was there. And she said, well, do you know Grandfather Martin? I said, no. And she said, well, he's one of the last surviving, or he is the last surviving elder of the Hopis that took the Hopi prophecy to the United Nations in the early 90s. And, you know, their message is about taking care of the land and life for the Great Spirit's purpose, as part of what they said there. But they were trying to draw attention to, we have a choice right now. We have a choice. We can continue leading this material life, where we're harming Mother Earth, taking more than we need, and leading to our ultimate destruction, or we can make the choice to become the spiritual people that we are, in tune with Mother Earth, in tune with natural law, and it will be good. But it's our choice. And so this is very important for them to take to the UN, and it had been part of the prophecy. They have a prophecy rock there on the reservation, which we actually got to see, that lays out this whole scene in a petroglyph. Anyway, so she says, well, Grandfather Martin is my uncle. And so she was able to arrange for us to see him. He was in Sedona, not on the reservation, and so we ended up making plans to go to Sedona. He had a woman, a caretaker, that brought him to the restaurant that we met in. And while we were there, I was sitting across from Grandfather Martin, and he didn't speak. And I don't really know how he communicated. I mean, I know I talked to him, but I sensed what he was saying back to me, but I really don't know how it all went. It was interesting. But anyway, I showed him a picture of Baba, and he seemed to know who he was. Then I showed him a picture of George Walking Bear, and I mentioned that he had passed away a couple of years before. And he basically indicated he knew George, and a tear came down when he had told him about he had passed on. And so we had a wonderful lunch together, and afterwards I had the bundle, I gave it to him. He took it happily. He seemed happy for the whole meeting. And so later I called the woman that was his caretaker, and I asked him, so what did he do with the bundle? And she said, well, it's interesting. Usually when people give something to him, he gives it to her. He doesn't want to keep anything, but not this one. He took it and put it in the top drawer of his dresser. So for whatever reason, Baba wanted this to happen. He wanted that connection to be made. I don't know anything more than that. But it just is part of the idea of doing this selfless service. There's so many ways that it presents itself to us. A lot of times it can seem like, hey, this is too challenging. I don't know that I'm up for it. But we know when the Guru asks us, even though we're not looking for a reward, somehow that's going to benefit us in the long run, as it is for his mission, everyone. So I think I'm through my 20 minutes or so. So I just wanted to say that we are all essential for the success of Swami's mission. And like Dr. Hari said, and came through in the SSE presentations, we all have a role to play. What is our passion? What are our talents, our skills? What can we do to help in this? And I know we are all doing something at this point. Some of us many things. So it's great. And I think in some ways that his mission, of course, it's not over. And in some ways, I think it's just beginning in a big way. So thank you all. Thank you for being part of it.